Today's session, please use the Q&A feature to submit your questions for the presenters. You can find the button at the bottom of your screen below the slides. Throughout the presentation, questions may be addressed. There is an option to ask your questions anonymously, and they can be answered towards the end of the presentation. Feel free to interact with your other attendees and the presenters using the chat function. We will be monitoring throughout, so if you have questions you pop in there, we can save them to later for the Q&A portion. And of course, the presenters love to see your comments. Today's session will be recorded and available on slurk.info within the next few weeks. And also, I would like to introduce to you our ASL interpreters from HASA. Today we have Anissa and Alyssa that are going to be interpreting this session. Closed caption is also available. And if you don't see it on your screen, you just tap live transcript and show subtitle towards the bottom of your screen. Okay, so I think that's it. Now I would like to introduce to you John Jewett and Chelsea Shockley. Take it away, guys.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Keisha, and thank you to everyone who was also with us for our keynote this morning. Welcome to Libraries 101 for Paraprofessionals, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen real quick. Alrighty. All right, so before we dive in, just kind of wanted to tell you sort of the origins of creating this session. So I've been in libraries for quite some time, and I'll get into a little bit about myself in the next slide, but just sort of thinking about our onboarding process, we know that typically for support staff, learning about the origins of libraries and things like that are not a usual part of the process. So we wanted to just give everyone a little bit of history of libraries, some core values of librarianship that apply to your daily work, and just some other tidbits that might help you in your library journey. And we are going to just give you a little intro about each other. You've probably seen us before, hopefully. If not, John Jewett and myself will be leading you in this session. So take it away, John.
Hi there. So yeah, my name's John. I'm the manager of the Social Science and History Department here at SLURC. And I'm the trainer liaison, which means that I'm the person that if you want us to come out and do some training for you, or you'd like to request a public program, yeah, I'm the person or one of the people that you would talk to do that. And yeah, I'm happy to share this information with you today and to be spending part of the day with you. And I'm grateful to you for spending part of the day with us.
All right, thank you, John. So my name is Chelsea Shockley. I'm the customer experience manager here at the State Library Resource Center and Enoch Pratt Free Library. I've been at Pratt for 10 years now. I just hit my 10-year mark in June, and most of my library experience is in public libraries. I started out in Harford County Public Library in 2008, if you can believe it. And I've also had a little bit of experience in academic libraries. When I was at Towson University, I worked in their special collections department. So my library history is a little bit varied, and I'm also in my final semester of library school at San Jose State University. So that was also a little bit of inspiration for today's session.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about what we're going to talk about today. We're going to go through a brief history of libraries. There's a resource you can look at for more information. We're going to talk a little bit about the purpose of libraries. Why are we here? And what are some different ways that we think about and talk about why we're here? We're going to look, and I'm going to ask you actually to go out into the world and find your library's mission statement. And then we're going to look at some of those and talk about them. We're going to talk about the core values of librarianship, the ALA core values of librarianship, and how those values relate to ethics and ethical issues or dilemmas and not high stakes ethical issues or dilemmas, but the kind of everyday ethical dilemmas that we face. And so those concepts, we're going to apply them in a very real way. This isn't a high concept intellectual discussion of ethics, right? This is about you talking to a customer at the desk. And then we're also going to talk about common library acronyms, so that for anybody who hasn't heard a ton of those before, we might demystify a few of those. So physically in the real world, even though I can't see you, raise your hand if you work in a library. The reason I bring this up is because Chelsea and I are your trainers and instructors today. That doesn't for 1 second mean that we know everything. It doesn't for 1 second mean that our experience is superior to yours, right? You've had experiences we haven't had. You've been in situations we haven't been in. You've got stories we don't have. We want to learn from you. We want you to learn from each other. And so the point and the purpose of this is to create something that's at least a little bit interactive. There's some lecture portions, but we're going to ask you to jump on a couple of Jamboards and share your ideas and your experiences. You're welcome to talk to one another in the chat also. And it's just like from the keynote this morning, right? We want everybody to know your experiences are valid. Things have happened to you that haven't happened to us. You've been in situations we haven't been in. You work in a library, right? And so you know absolutely as much about all these things as we do. And, you know, we're happy to facilitate that discussion for you. All right, so a brief history of libraries. And we're going to drop a link in the chat for the DPLA exhibition, History of Libraries. And this is where this information comes from. It's a really nice bite-sized chunk of information about libraries and about what they do. Take a look. I'm not going to suggest that you take a look now, but when you have some time, take a look. I'm going to look at 3 sections of the exhibit. There are several additional sections that are well worth checking out. So the very earliest history of libraries. So in the late 1700s, people who could read and had the money to buy books had private book clubs, right? And those grew into private lending libraries, such as the Library Company of Philadelphia. This was often because books had limited print runs. And if you had a book and your neighbor, you know, wanted to read it too, he couldn't order it on Amazon, obviously, right? And so people, you know, founding father types, exchanged books and swapped books and built collections. And so eventually those became private member lending libraries. So the first public library, the town of Franklin, Pennsylvania, changed its name to Franklin, Pennsylvania. And Benjamin Franklin gave them his books, and he that became the first public library in the US in 1790. So there's been public libraries for a while. The first large-scale public library, the first public library in a city, was the Boston Public Library, founded in 1848, opened in 1854 with 16,000 volumes. And this was the beginning of 50, 70 years of library expansion of that sort, right? So the Pratt opened in the 1880s, and with a central library and 4 branches. So starting with that in Boston, that's the real beginning of the idea that a library, a big fancy library with a robust collection, is a thing that a city of note should have, right? So communities, starting with this, communities want libraries. So the biggest thing to happen for public libraries in the US and really all around the world was Andrew Carnegie. He saw what Pratt had done here in Baltimore, and he thought, that's good, and I'm really rich. And so between 1883, really the very early days of even while the Pratt was being built, he funded the building of 2,500 libraries worldwide, including branches here in Baltimore. So the original libraries were Pratt, from the donation given by Enoch Pratt. Subsequently, we also have some Carnegie libraries. 2,500 libraries all around the world. 1,795 of them were in the US. And if you think about what an impact that would have made at that time, right? Nearly 2,000 library buildings of all kinds of sizes, in all kinds of places, many of which are still in use. That's this real boost to the growth of the public library as an institution. And then just as an example, right, of another following on from that phase of Carnegie libraries, during the Depression, libraries had to get, just like we do, and the conversations that we have, they had to get innovative and creative in connecting with their customers, right? So this particular exhibit, the WPA during the Depression funded 5,800 traveling libraries, including a houseboat on the Yazoo River in Mississippi, and including these horseback librarians, 200 horseback librarians in the rural mountain communities in eastern Kentucky, where they were able to reach 100,000 residents. And think about that for a minute, right? That we have transportation, we have roads, we have the internet, we can Zoom, we can do all these things to reach people, right? And at this time in history, you're going to reach somebody, you're going to strap 2 boxes of books to the back of a horse and go and find the people, right? And so these librarians on their houseboats and on their horses, they were setting that example. In the chat, does anybody know where the first bookmobile in the US was used? Has anybody heard this story before? Yes, Maryland, Diane. Washington County, Maryland. Absolutely right. So that's a Maryland library fact that we can kind of lay claim to. May well be for similar reasons, right? That people lived far apart and were difficult to reach. So again, in terms of the history of libraries, and in terms of what we're thinking about and talking about today, librarians have been thinking about creative and interesting ways to reach people for 100 years, right? I cannot ride a horse. so they're doing a job that I would be completely unable to do, and I'm sure they were absolutely fabulous at doing it, right? But we think about all kinds of innovative and creative ways to connect with our customers today and here is, you know, a group of people doing exactly the same thing in an appropriate, historically, but also regionally and appropriate way. So when you're having that conversation, you know, you're having the same conversation that the horseback librarians had. So we've talked about history, and as I say, I really would love it if everybody would go back. The link is in the chat, so when you have a chance, grab that and take a look at that exhibit. It's really interesting. There's several pieces that I've skipped over that are really interesting and engaging and exciting and very much worth knowing about. So what do your customers in 2022 want from the library? Jump in the chat and give me an answer if you can, or if you would. And I'm thinking concepts, you know, and ideas, and rather than specifics. Okay, belonging, community space, computer literacy, space to study, customer service, community connections, personal interaction, information, someone to talk to, books and other materials and resources, Wi-Fi, social worker, tutoring space, find a job, quality education, printing and technology help, technology access. Yeah, all these things, right? Ukuleles, yay! To see themselves reflected in the collection, that's a great answer. Computers and meeting spaces, yeah. So let's look at some of those, and again, you clearly already have some of these ideas and answers, and you clearly already have this very expansive view of community service that you know, that I want you to I want that to be one of the things that you take away from this session. I think it's one of the things you've brought to this session, and that's really wonderful. But let's talk about just some concepts about that. So materials, right? At the most basic definition, a library is a building full of stuff, right? And the library existed first to be a building full of stuff. Now, as you see, we've learned and grown and developed, and we do a lot more things, right? But it is, as you know, working in customer service, materials are real important, right? What else? Experiences. So a lot of the things, programming, technology education, meeting with the League of Women Voters, having an expert come by to tell you about a thing, right? These are all experiences and educational experiences, things that we really want to share with our customers. Information, folks want answers to their questions. And again, in the keynote this morning, but everything we do, everything we talk about, right? If somebody says, I'm having a transplant and I want to know about the possible risks and side effects, that's information. If somebody says, what's on TV at 8 o'clock tonight? That's information, right? Or where's the nearest pizza place? So there's a qualitative difference in those questions, or it's possible to decide that there's a qualitative difference between those questions. But at the base, you are providing information to somebody, you're enabling them to move on with their day. And the way that I think about this, the way this was talked about this morning in the keynote, the way I'm sure most of you think about this is, your question is important to me because it's important to you, right? You need to know this to move on with the rest of your day. And so I'm going to try and find a good answer for you. I'm going to find a good answer for you. So again, materials, experiences, information, community, right? So this was something else that came up. And some of you may have heard this idea of the third place, right? The library, we spend a lot of time at home. We spend a lot of time at work. Nearly anywhere else you can think of, you have to pay to be, right? If you want to sit in a Starbucks, you got to buy a coffee. If you want to hang out at the mall, you've probably got to be shopping, right? If you want to go to a movie theater, you've got to buy a ticket and watch a movie. There are very few places in the world, places in towns and cities where you can just be, right? And nobody's going to say, as long as you're not disturbing the peace, nobody's going to say, why are you here? Nobody's going to ask you to justify yourself. Nobody's going to ask you to buy a coffee. You know, nobody's going to say, stop watching that silly skateboard video on YouTube and type a resume, right? Because we don't make those kind of judgments. You can be in a library, and as I say, as long as you're not actively disturbing the peace, it's a third place, it's not home, it's not work, and you can be part of the community that's there. You can even shape the community, right? A customer can come in and say, hey, I really love knitting. Can we have a knitting circle? And sure, you probably can, right? If you can find enough knitters and if you can promote the thing, then the customers, doesn't have to just be staff that shape the community. And if we're paying attention and if we're listening, right, we're going to allow those things to happen, and the library is going to reflect the best of the community. And so how do you provide materials, experiences, information, and community? How do you do that? And again, concepts to keep an eye on and think about, right? We have core services. We check materials in and out. We provide computers. We do certain things that we will probably always do. We innovate and create, right? We keep an eye on what the community needs, and we add those things to our services, right? So digital equity, right? Making sure that people understand how to access information that's online and have the tools to be able to access information online, right? Social work, being that, again, that judgment-free third place where you can talk to a social worker and make that connection to community services. And a social worker or a social work intern can do that, can make that connection for a customer in a way that I can't as a librarian, right? Because they're already kind of connected to those resources. So we think and we innovate and we create. We might focus, especially, right? We might say, well, let me ask you, right? What do you do in your library system that is a direct response to some particular local condition, right? Is there something particular happening in your county? And because of that, the library does something particular in response. Okay, so think about what that might be, right? Yeah, rainbow story time, social work assistance, teen zone, right? And that might even be your branch and not the other branch, right? Because I've worked somewhere where the one branch was next door to a middle school, right? The branch I worked at wasn't. The one next door to the middle school, understandably, gets 50 kids at 3 o'clock every afternoon, right? And my branch didn't. And so again, we don't have to, right, a bus drop off. We don't have to all be the same. In fact, we don't want to all be the same, right? We want to be aware of our communities and provide the specific things that the community needs. Public Wi-Fi in the parking lot, right? Absolutely. That's excellent. Vaccines, sure. So we collaborate, and this is increasingly important, right? I'm trained to do a particular set of things. I'm not trained to give people vaccines, but I understand how important it is that people should be able to access vaccines, right? So I'm going to, and I'm saying it wasn't me. We are going to talk to the health department and say, hey, health department, we've got a building. The building's full of people. We can put more people in the building. If we did that, can you be here and give them their vaccines, right? So again, passports, right? We're collaborating with the State Department. We can't issue the passport. It's not the Enoch Pratt Library International Travel Card, right? But we can be a convenient local place for people to come by and show their ID and get their pictures taken. And then we can make sure that those materials get to where they need to get so that that document can be issued. Yeah, so again, yeah, county real estate, water, sewer bills, think about those collaborations. One of the things, like I've said it already, but one of the things I think about a library being is a building full of people, right? And so nearly anything that a group of people might want is a thing you can do in your building full of people, right? Food giveaways, job fairs, these are all fabulous ideas. And these are all 2022 ideas, right? These are all 2032 ideas. These are forward-facing future ideas. These are not, I have these books. Does anybody want to read my encyclopedias? Right? This is a really forward-thinking, you all are giving a really forward-thinking, dynamic set of ideas about what the library is. Special focus, collaboration, partnerships, and knowing your community, right? You know your community, you know your customers, you know the community agencies in your community and what they can provide and what they need. If you're on some of these county-wide community groups or somebody at your library is, then you're sharing information about what your library can do, and those groups are sharing information about what they need and what they can do for you and for your customers. And that vision, right, that expansive, community-focused, involved vision is really powerful, really significant, and really important. And you've done a great job of setting that up with all of your answers. So I'm going to give everybody 90 seconds to go look for their mission, their own library's mission statement. And then I'm going to have you come back and either post it in the chat or just keep a handle on it. And then we're going to talk to you a little bit about unpacking that mission statement, dismantling it, and what the individual values within it are. So here's the 90 seconds. And thank you so much. Chelsea's going to present this next section, and I really appreciate everybody participating, and I'll be back on in a few minutes.
Thank you, John. And I will just go a little bit into sort of this mission statement section. So most organizations and libraries have a mission statement that guides the organization's values. It's also usually a huge part of strategic planning. Thank you to everyone who was able to sort of find that before, but again, you can look up your organization's mission statement and place it into the chat, and we'll go over that in a few minutes. And so a mission statement should be action-based, should tell you the purpose of the organization and how that organization plans to serve its users. They should be more than just a set of buzzwords. And most libraries are focused on access, giving users information, things like that. So as we will wrap up in a few seconds. Alrighty. Oh, I did not watch the whole video, so let me pause that because I don't think we need to hear that beep, beep, beep all the time. Alrighty, so let's go back to. Sorry, y'all, 1 minute, please. All right, let's start. Technical difficulty. Okay. So excuse me, I have to read the chat on the side as I'm also sharing my screen. All right, so I know some of you are from the same organization, so I'll try not to repeat too much. So let's go back. Oh, wow. Thank you everyone for participating. Let's go through this. So Sarah says, by facilitating the public's freedom to explore, to invent, and to transform, FCPL connects people to ideas and to each other, helping to foster individual and community growth. All right. We connect people with ideas and information in a diverse community, valuing opportunity and education for all. Calvert Library's mission is to serve as a gateway to information, imagination, and inspiration. We empower individuals by facilitating lifelong learning and strengthen our community by providing opportunities for connection to one another and the world. And as we go through these, just sort of think about common themes that you're seeing, like you see a lot of talk about community, growth, things like that. CCPL, join us to experience lifelong learning through impactful programs, resources, and services. Okay, thank you for doing the short version. Let's go to educate, enrich, and inspire from AACPL. All right, Prince George's County, we build relationships that support discovery by providing equal access and opportunities to growth. All right, let's see what else. And I apologize if I skip over any. The Ruth Enloe Library uses its collection, programs, services, and technology to transform its community by championing literacies and lifelong learning by bringing people and groups together and by promoting democracy and civic engagement. All right, let's see. We provide equitable access to information, ideas, and experiences that spark, I love that, imagination and expand possibilities for all. We deliver high quality public education for all. That's a great one. And I think I have gone through most of them. Let's see. Nimitz Library provides learning environments, information resources, and expertise to foster research skills, critical thinking, and a spirit of lifelong inquiry to empower midshipmen, faculty, and staff to use information effectively and ethically. All right. TCFL inspires our community to discover ideas and information to enrich and renew lives. Thank you everyone for sharing. I believe I got to everyone, hopefully. Let's see. The citizens of Calvert, Charles, and St. Mary's counties will have equal access to information through the efficient, economic, and effective sharing of resources among public libraries and all types of information agencies. All right, so thank you everybody for sharing. I also put up some mission statements. These are a lot of East Coast focused, but these are just some mission statements from other libraries. Philadelphia, which is a peer library of us, their mission is to advance literacy, guide learning, and inspire curiosity. Cleveland is we are the People's University, the center of learning for a diverse and inclusive community. Boston, the mission of the library is focused on 4 core areas: reading and literacy, spaces and programs, reference and instruction, and special collections and cultural heritage. So as you can see with Boston, they seem to be especially, information materials focused. New York, the mission of the New York Public Library is to inspire lifelong learning, advance knowledge, and strengthen our communities. And last but not least, our own mission statement from here in Baltimore. Our mission is to empower, enrich, and enhance the quality of life for all through equitable access to information, services, and opportunity. All right. And let me see, there's a few more popping in the chat. Montgomery County Public Libraries offers free and equal access to services and resources that connect the people of Montgomery County. So as I'm sort of going through all these, I'm seeing a lot of connection, community, education, literacy, things like that. My old library, Harford County Public Library, is the world's most customer-focused library, best known for anticipating and meeting the needs of its diverse community. HCPL is the place to read, learn, and discover. The library amazes and delights, redefining the library's experience. Customers are wowed by the innovation and personalized services offered by the library. Their library experience is always awesome. Customers are outspoken ambassadors for the library and consider it an essential part of their lives. So in addition to mission, we also have sort of visions for the library as well. But today we're just sort of focusing on the mission statement, but I also wanted to introduce something that is a little bit more new in the library world, which is inclusion statements. So this is just an example from the Free Library of Philadelphia. As you know, in recent years, libraries are trying to become more inclusive spaces. So just making that very known to your user base is always helpful. One moment, please. All right, so the Free Library of Philadelphia is a welcoming and inclusive public space and strongly believes in promoting understanding and community engagement. All 54 of our libraries provide a safe haven for individuals of all ages and backgrounds, providing homework help, ESL classes, supportive job search assistance, and much more. We encourage and host conversations about differences and complex social issues. The library exists to provide opportunities for discussion supported by educational resources, access to a vast array of information, and ideas that transform communities, open minds, and promote inclusion. So I'm just seeing in the chat, this is actually the Free Library of Philadelphia. Yeah, I didn't actually know that they had 54 libraries before I read this, so they're giving us a run for our money. But just wanted to point that out as well, that you may see this more in organizations and libraries as we are trying to become more inclusive organizations and reflecting the community that we serve. And thank you again for sharing in the chat. You guys are all very lively today. So one of the large portions of this presentation are the core values of librarianship. So even if you are not a reference librarian, if you don't have a library degree, we still believe that these core values are really key to all library work, no matter what level you work at, no matter which department you're in, we're all working towards the same goal. So in the chat, Keisha has just linked, we're going to try something out new today. There's a Jamboard. And so as we go through these next 12 values, if you just wanted to put in a sticky note, just open this Jamboard in a new tab. You can add a little sticky note and put some text in it. Just think about how you or your organization are practicing these core values in your daily work. If you're having trouble with the Jamboard, you can go ahead and pop it into the chat, and we will review that as well right at the end of these 12 values. All right, so first up, we have access, which is pretty straightforward. All information resources that are provided directly or indirectly to the library, regardless of technology, format, or methods of delivery, should be readily, equally, and equitably accessible to all library users. So just thinking about some services that come to mind, we have a program here at the Pratt called Books by Mail. You may have it as well. So if your customer can't come to the library, how else can you serve them? Also sort of thinking between the difference between equal and equitable. So equal is giving all of your branches the same amount of books, but if you have a higher population in some areas, are you actually being equitable with your services? Just thinking about that. And also thinking about the format that you offer materials. Not everyone's coming in for print now as much. So do you have a robust ebook collection? Things like that. Confidentiality and privacy. So especially those working in circulation, this is not something brand new to you, hopefully. Protecting user privacy and confidentiality is necessary for intellectual freedom and fundamental to the ethics and practice of librarianship. So one of the huge things is that we're not sharing the books that a customer checked out with anyone else who's not authorized. I know in some systems you may have proxy borrowers, things like that, but those are policies that are set and the customer is signing up for that service. We're making sure that we're not gossiping about what people are checking out, trying to just protect the customer's privacy as much as we can. And so those are the first two values. All right, and now we have democracy. Libraries provide free and equal access to information for all people of the community the library serves. This is very true, especially for public libraries. You may have different levels of access based on residential status, like you might have out-of-state library cards, but generally anyone can come into the library and use all of your services. The American Library Association fundamentally opposes the creation of economic barriers to access services and resources provided by publicly funded libraries, including public, school, and academic. So if you're privately funded, that might look a little bit different. You might not be able to enter certain libraries. Like I can't just maybe walk up into a campus and go into the library if I'm not a student or faculty. So it's just sort of based on your funding structure. All right, and then we have diversity. We value our nation's diversity and strive to reflect that diversity by providing a full spectrum of resources and services to the community we serve. Some of these things could be like materials in different languages. Is your collection actually, representing the community that you're in? It's also important that our organization reflects the community, not just in our resources, but also in the people who work there. There might be cultural gaps if you're not focusing on, what your community looks like, or if you don't have someone who's dedicated to making sure that you have a very diverse collection. All right, and then education and lifelong learning. ALA promotes the creation, maintenance, and enhancement of a learning society, encouraging its members to work with educators, government officials, and organizations to support efforts that ensure that school, public, academic, and special libraries in every community cooperate to provide lifelong learning services to all. So in public libraries, that's usually pretty simple. A lot of us work with school libraries in the area, class visits, things like that to, make sure we're connecting with our education community. Academic and school libraries, their education community is pretty much built in. And then special libraries, what does that look like to you when you're connecting for education and lifelong learning? So if you wanted to pop that into the Jamboard or the chat, I'm really interested to hear that. And one of the most critical values is intellectual freedom. We uphold the principles of intellectual freedom and resist all efforts to censor library resources. This is also very timely because Banned Books Week was just last week. I've been seeing a lot of programs and things like that, especially just in the news. You've seen some libraries that are actually being shut down by its community because they don't want their children to have access to certain things. I'm not going to turn it into a news segment, but a lot about some things that are happening in other states that are just kind of affecting access to these books that are really important for people to have access to. And just like we want to provide as much access as we can, we also can't put every book in our collection. If we could, we would be running out of space. So also having collection policies in place can really protect you as well if someone has a a complaint about your collection, how are you actually building that out? And public good. ALA reaffirms the following fundamental values of libraries in the context of discussing outsourcing and privatization of library services. These values include that libraries are an essential public good and are fundamental institutions. So how I sort of read that is that, libraries are really community spaces, and we are dedicated to just being a good space for people to come to. Alrighty. And preservation. The association supports the preservation of information published in all media and formats. The association affirms that the preservation of information resources is central to libraries and librarianship. So in addition to preserving, physical books, that might also include digitizing your collection to ensure that, it's not going anywhere. If you do the Circ tour as well, you will see we have a lot of older books in our collection that we, sometimes they have to go to the bindery and preservation unit so that we can keep them in our collection. We just want to make sure that we're not losing too much information. And another key value is professionalism. The American Library Association supports library services by professionally qualifying personnel who have been educated in graduate programs within institutions of higher education. It is of vital importance that there be professional education available to meet the social needs and goals of library services. So one of the things that you might see is if an institution is ALA accredited. So this means that your degree is generally accepted when you apply to be a librarian somewhere. I do know we're doing a lot more hybrid positions these days, sort of advancing the profession so that we're also making sure we are educating those who may not necessarily have a degree, but we're making sure that they have, that robust reference training. And fun fact, I heard a story of someone who had gone through library school, but they had not gone to an ALA accredited institution, and they finished their program and they were unable to, get jobs. So if you are interested in library school, make sure you go to ALA accredited institution. All right, and then we have service. We provide the highest level of service to all library users. We strive for excellence in the profession by maintaining and enhancing our own knowledge and skills, by encouraging the professional development of coworkers, and by fostering aspirations of potential members of the profession. So professional development is a huge piece of librarianship. If your position requires CE forms, that professional development and ongoing continuing education is a really core value of librarianship. All right. Oh, and this is a great comment. I appreciate the many options opening up for those without an MLS, since acquiring a master's degree can be a barrier to access for potential rockstar employees from underserved communities. That is such a good point. I know, I know states have certain regulations for who can technically be a librarian. I know as a reference substitute, I just needed a bachelor's degree. I know certain levels of reference work just require the bachelor's, which can also be a barrier. But I do agree that, and John were also talking about it, that, soft skills are so important as well when you're working in libraries. You can teach a lot of people how to do a reference interview, but how can you, building on from before, how can you teach people to be empathetic and all those things? So yes, definitely trying to find spaces to elevate those staff. And I really do appreciate organizations who have tuition reimbursement programs. So if you are interested in getting your degree and becoming a librarian eventually, or working in a certain area of the libraries that does require that it's a little bit easier for you to get, although I know it does take a lot of time. All right, and then we have social responsibility. The broad social responsibilities of the American Library Association are defined in terms of the contribution that librarianship can make in bettering or solving the critical problems of society. Some of these programs that we've talked about, like, having more social workers in the library. And then I also wanted to mention that ALA also releases statements supporting libraries across the country. And I actually saw today that yesterday they had sent out a letter of concern to the FBI. There were some threats of violence to some library systems and individual librarians, in recent times. And so just, putting out stances like that can really support our community. And sustainability is the last and final value. It's actually the most recent one. So ALA is supporting the library community by showing its commitment to assisting in the development of sustainable libraries. This consists of practices that are environmentally sound, economically feasible, and socially equitable. Libraries play an important part and unique role in promoting community awareness about resilience, climate change, and a sustainable future. They're also leading by example by taking steps to reduce their environmental footprint. One of the ways I know we've done that in our most recent renovation of Central, we had become LEED certified. I know some other systems have done that as well as they have been renovating their buildings. And, just these sort of three values making up sustainability, just making sure that we have our libraries in the future and that they are leading by example. And let's go ahead and visit our Jamboard. Awesome. All right, so again, the question is, how are you or your organization practicing core values? Our computers are accessible via library cards and day passes so that those without ID can still access our digital services. That's awesome. Removing barriers, making it easier to get a library card. And also see find free and auto renewals. Those are also ways that we can reduce our barriers to get people into our buildings. Meeting rooms, that's a great service. Expanding internet access resources in the form of hotspots and Chromebooks for patrons without internet access in the home. I know that's been a big project that most libraries have been working on lately. We also just recently had a giveaway with Dell to families with students under 18. So programs like that are so great for the community. We try to retain print access for our elderly and underserved populations who do not want digital access items. That's also great. Although a lot of us are digital, some of us are not, and some of us just like a print book in our hand. All right, had an audit of our collection to ensure it was diverse and are beefing up the collection in areas where we were weak in the audit. That's a great idea. Making sure that collections are inclusive and well represented to the community. Again, sort of a diverse collection, that's great. Guest passes for customers who don't have a library account. Game consoles for kids. Free food pantry, that's awesome. And also just thinking about, although we want to have literacy, we also want to have entertainment, and we also are recognizing the needs of our community with the food pantry. We indicate on our name tags if we speak a second language, and our coworkers are aware of who speaks what and who to call on when needed. That's awesome. I know our system has a list, but putting it on the name tag is such a great touch. English, Spanish language clubs to practice with other speakers. That's awesome. I know Babbel exists, but just having that in-person presence is also really great. We like to utilize Marina and the wider OCLC resources to acquire books we can't carry in our collection for whatever reason. Shout out to Milo. And we have a high number of out-of-county items come through our branch each day. So yes, thank you to all of our interlibrary loan staff across the state. That's such a great service. I know, especially as a student, I borrow books sometimes because you don't have to pay for the textbook. So it's such a great service. And finally, we have partnering with student groups to create displays, update our collections, partnership with McNaughton Publishers so that we have a consistent shipment of new popular reading books. And I believe it says, maybe they just didn't finish their thought. it said partnering. So, just partnering is such a great way to get your community involved. And thank you again to everyone who submitted something into our GM board. It looks like that went pretty well. And I don't see anything in the chat. So we will get back to our presentation. And now John is going to take over.
So moving beyond values, if you smash values together, conflicting values, then you wind up with an ethical issue, right? An ethical problem. So I find this to be a helpful way of thinking about, why is this difficult? Why am I having trouble deciding what to do, right? Because you feel like even when you've been doing this a long time, right? You feel like you should know what to do. And sometimes we do, and it's clear, and no, you can't, or yes, you can, or sure, I'll get another one of those for you, whatever that is. But sometimes you really have to think for a minute about what to do. And the reason I find the reason is often because somebody's asking me to prioritize one of these values over another, right? And that's what an ethical problem is. So we're just going to go down a list of example questions, examples of those kind of ethical dilemmas. And again, they're not massively high stakes, right? But they express this tension between the values, right? So can you tell me if it's a kid from my class who has Huck Finn checked out? Because if it is, I'll just ask him to borrow it. That's a reasonable request, right? No, in the chat, right? Absolutely. Because I can't tell you who has any of these things checked out, right? But the question, the person in front of me is asking me a reasonable question, and I'm inclined to service, right? The value that I want to express is service. And, sometimes it doesn't seem reasonable to say, no, right, so exactly, let's see if we can get you a copy from somewhere else. A different branch has it. It's here in the ebook collection. Exactly. And so there are ways to support that customer and to resolve that ethical conflict. Is this dermatitis? I didn't go to medical school. I can't diagnose. Exactly. I'm not a doctor. What's the but, right? What's the yes and, or the I can't tell you but and? Right. Would you like me to find you a local doctor? Here's the sign-ups for the health insurance. Here's our books about skin conditions. Right. Exactly. So, and the important thing there, yeah, let's look at a medical book together. Absolutely, right? So, and we want to find a way to meet the customer's need, right, without exceeding our own expertise. Yeah, absolutely. A branch from my neighbor's tree fell on my car. What should I do? What part of that question is the problem part? Right, at the CERT desk, it's more like I can't diagnose that. Can't give legal advice, call your insurance agent, here's 311. Right, what the problem part of the question is, what should I do, right? Because that's a request for a personal opinion, or it at least sounds like a request for a personal opinion. A branch from my neighbor's tree fell on my car. do you have any information about what I should do, is not an ethical, it's a way of phrasing the question that presents much less of an ethical problem, right? Because it's not asking you for a personal opinion. Right, so Sarah's question in the chat, someone asked me how to handle a police report and an insurance interaction regarding something they'd borrowed from us that was stolen from them. And that's interesting because the customer might think you have a role to play because it was library material that was stolen. But it really doesn't matter, that given the nature of that question, it kind of doesn't matter if it was library material or from their neighbor's house or from their house or from school. You can provide general information about how to file a police report or how to contact insurance, but there's going to be a limit to the specific information we can give. Should I get this warranty for this used car I'm going to buy is another good one. I'm going to steal that, Matt, next time I teach this class. Right, we can't tell people how to spend their money or how to use their resources. We can give them information, but we can't tell them what to do. I'm going to make a copy of this book before I bring it back. You don't mind, do you? And that one, you know, obviously there's copyright concerns, and we can communicate those to the customer and post a copyright notice. Right, the copyright holder will. We can post a copyright notice at the Xerox machines and make sure everybody's aware of how that works, right? And or we can extend the loan or find an ebook or put a second copy on hold or do whatever we can do to extend that customer's ability to keep hold of that material, especially if nobody's waiting on hold. There's no point in taking that book back. Can you scan this doctor's note and help me edit it? That happened to me. Right. And I was quite surprised. Yeah, right, absolutely. No. And I think the person wanted a little longer off work, right? We have software that you can, that will edit documents to edit a document, emphasis a document, but not that document. But again, you can see that there's an ethical dilemma, right? We want to provide service to the customer, but we don't necessarily want to support fraud. So that's another kind of interesting question, and how you respond and support the values. Right, there you go. I can show you how to use the scanner and computer. Do you know a good dentist, plumber, contractor, carpet cleaner, lawyer? Yes, my brother's a plumber. Here's his business card. Right? Yeah, exactly. So we want to provide people with a list of those people or reviews of those people and allow them to choose, right? So let me show you Angie's list. Let me find the yellow pages. Let me put you on the Maryland State Bar Association membership list. Whatever that is, provide people with a list and with the information that they need to make an informed decision. But obviously we're not making that decision for them. And the last one, I can help you look up information on those type of services. Exactly. I'm not good with computers. Can I pay you to write my resume? Right, there's resume templates online. Here's books with sample resumes. We can look at those together. Right, I can't write your resume. And resume writing in particular, I mean, all of these things, right, are problematic, but resume writing in particular is a real challenge. If the person doesn't get the job, then who's responsible for that? If I wrote the customer's resume and they don't get the job, who's responsible for that? Right? Yeah, print material on how to write a resume, job readiness program, and they're doing a resume workshop next Saturday. Absolutely. And this is where, you know, if you're already doing those things, right? This is where communication is super important. If everybody knows that you're already doing that, then you can make those referrals and support those services. So that's really, really great. And then also beyond that, right, beyond those questions, break room conversations and confidentiality, right? Don't get off the floor, go back in the break room and say, you'll never believe what Mrs. Smith just asked me for, right? Because that's not really any of your business, and it's certainly not the business of the person you were about to tell, right? If that makes sense. Privacy on the floor or in the checkout line, right? So there's a gap between the head of the queue and the person who's being served at the desk. If somebody starts asking you a private question, you know, about paying their fines or managing their overdue materials, or the pest infestation at their house that caused the materials to be damaged, something you wouldn't, you know, stand on the roof and holler. You want to take those people, you know, into an office or step to one side and make sure that that isn't a publicly broadcasted conversation. A lot of the conversations that we have are private, and they rely on the fact that people, you know, trust us to take their concerns seriously and to respect their needs and circumstances, right? Non-identifiable holds. If your hold books are on the public floor, is it possible to identify who they're on hold for? Probably not, right? We wrap the spines so that you can see who the book is for, but you can't see what the book is. And I've seen other places do the same thing. But we want, you know, people's interests are their own interests. Care with personal information, card numbers and PIN numbers, right? PINs. We're not going to leave a report laying around. We're not going to give somebody's library card number to their neighbor or their ex just because they ask. Obviously, you know these things, but this is another ethical, you know, another ethical concern, and it's part of privacy. And one more example. Oh, something in the chat here. Customers expected us to talk with each other about them. Each of us would only get told part of the story, and they assumed we talked to each other. Okay, I mean, with permission, I guess, right? Or if you're being told, you know, Diane knows what happened, go ask Diane, fine. But we don't want to broadcast people's business without their permission. And then last example, and you could think we could be here all afternoon and think of a bunch of examples, but when you leave a phone message for somebody to let them know that their holds are here, what do you say? Right? Hi, Mrs. Smith, your book about whatever is here for you to pick up, come on by. Or do you just say, hi, Mrs. Smith, the materials that you requested are here for you to collect. And then if somebody else in Mrs. Smith's house happens to push the button on the answer phone, if people still have answer phone, right? Or hear the message, or see the postcard, then the actual nature of the material that's been requested is still confidential. Right, there you go. And again, you all know that, and we all say that, and the reason I bring it up is that there's a very deliberate reason why that phrasing is chosen and is worded that way, right? That and it goes back to ethics, and it goes back to values, and it is one of these things where a thing that we say every day is a direct expression of an ethical thing, right? Of a direct expression of a value, a set of values, and yeah. All right, so next piece. This makes everything sound really complicated, right? And I don't want you to think that you're alone, because you're not, right? We're not. And why not, right? We're going to just really quickly talk about available tools and available resolutions. So you can talk, and I'm sure you already do, right? You can talk to supervisors and colleagues. Even if you are a supervisor, you have a supervisor, right? Or you have peers in other departments or other branches who are doing the same thing you're doing. I'm frequently part of conversations that start with, hey, this is kind of weird. Has this happened to you? What do you think right? What would you do? So talk to those folks, right? Places also have policy and procedure manuals. So the 60% of this stuff that happens all the time is already in a book, right? And there's a policy for it. And there's a reason there's a policy for it. And if things change and you need to do something differently, there's a procedure for changing the policy, right? And so again, I encourage all of you to do that. But you're already aware. Best practice, right? So what do we know works? What have we seen work? What do the people who've been around for 20 years do? And why do they do it? And often we just observe people doing things and we don't ask them why. But often there's a values, ethics, either there's a process improvement reason, it's faster if, or it's more efficient if, or there's an ethics and values reason. Right, and again, being part of a network, so your manager can help you to think of, what's a good way of rephrasing something. And I have that too, where the only way my brain is letting me formulate this message is very direct, and maybe sometimes very direct is good, but how do we how can we soften it, or how can we state it a different way, or how can we try to get a different outcome? Yeah. Professional networks and associations. So we started this section looking at ALA values. There's a number of those lists and that kind of information and suggestions and best practices on the ALA website. There are multiple MLA committees for various different things, right? And so you can ask those folks, or you can look at something that they've produced, or you can review a training that they've presented. There are lots and lots of ways to get information to resolve these situations. You can research, right? You can look at references and articles and things that people have written. You can do what you've done today and look for training, right? Attend a conference or attend a webinar. You can ask certainly you can ask us, right? But you can ask other folks too. Hey, can you put on a training about such and such? Or you mentioned this in your presentation. Can you turn that into a whole hour or a 2-hour or a 3-hour session? And most of the time we can do that, and other people who are interested in training will do that too. Common sense, right? Most of the time you know what to do, right? And that's why the times when you don't feel so strange. But most of the time you know what to do. And then the last one is the customer service principles that you may have at your institution. And the things that are important at your place, and the things that your boss and their boss have suggested that you should follow through, right? So I don't want, the reason that slide exists, right, is because I don't want anybody to be standing there in the middle of the floor behind the desk in the spotlight thinking, oh my goodness, ethics and values, and I have to make this decision. And I don't want to make these things seem like more high stakes than they are, right? I want to put them in context for you, and then I want to show you all the different places that you can look for help. So please don't ever feel like you're on your own, or you know, you have to make this solo choice, because 99.99999% of the time you absolutely don't. There's going to be somebody somewhere that you can ask or contact. So second slide of the Jamboard, if you still have the Jamboard open, what do you do if there's a tension between what you want to do and what the rules say that you should do? And we'll drop that link in the chat for you as well. And again, just, you know, it's all anonymous, so you can put a post-it up there, or you can type on the board and just tell us what you want to do and what the rules say you should do. Okay, yeah, it depends on how absolute the particular rule is. We have a lot of discretion due to the diverse nature of clientele. We focus on the customer service aspect and bend the rules in order to keep good customer relations. Depends on the situation and how I can help the person. Does violating the rule lower a barrier to access or create an unreasonable future expectation or create issues of fairness? Make an exception, but explain it's a one-time courtesy. Yeah, this is all great. Look for what you can do within the rules. Have another staff member always speak to the customer. Procedures are put in place for the best interests of the customer, but if there's an equity situation, you can ask a supervisor. Yeah, my feeling is you want to keep the customer, right? And so if within reason it's possible to offer a third renewal, or to, you know, extend a loan period, or to whatever that is, just to keep the customer, then that seems like it would be a good thing to do. Obviously, there are plenty of things that we can't do, nothing that will harm the library or is contrary to library principles, right? That's the latest post-it there. And that's a great way to think about it, right? We're not going to break the law. We're not going to harm the institution. But yes, if it's possible to find a compromise, we will. All right, so we're going to jump back to the slides. And I just really quickly, I want to frame what we can count, right? Checkouts, attendance, foot traffic, digital access. These are the things that we can count, that we can track. But how do we talk about what we do? Outputs versus outcomes. An output is a count, it's a number. How many children's books circulated yesterday? An outcome is an achievement or a measurable difference. I'm trying to define the word without using the word, and that's kind of difficult. But so the output is we circulated 100 children's books yesterday. The outcome is that Billy can read, right? And we're very good typically at counting outputs, and it's quite difficult to track outcomes, right? Because if I go knock on Billy's family's door and say, hey, can Billy read yet? Are they going to be pleased to see me or expect to see me? So as you work your way through, you know, as you're involved in these conversations, where can we count outcomes? How can we do surveys or circle back with people or talk to our regulars? Or, you know, hey, you borrowed all those gardening books. How did your garden turn out? Those kinds of things, right? So that not only do we have numbers about something that we've done, but we also maybe have some stories, because stories are really good for changing people's minds and motivating folks. All right, and if you have just a couple more minutes to spend with us, we're going to move through the library acronyms section, and I'm really grateful to you for hanging in there with us.
Thank you, John. So I'm going to go through this very quickly. And on the final slide, when I upload it to slurk.info, it will have all of these spelled out. I didn't want to spoil anything. So ALA is the American Library Association, as we've already touched on. It's the oldest and largest library association in the world, founded in 1876. So it's been with us for a very long time. It does have some subdivisions. So AASL is the American Association of School Librarians. ACRL is something you might see a lot as well, which is the Association of College and Research Libraries. ALSC is the Association for Library Services to Children, and PLA is the Public Library Association, also a great conference if you have not been and you have a chance to go. RUSA is the Reference and User Services Association, and YALSA, my favorite one to say, is the Young Adult Library Services Association. So those are all groups that fall under ALA. SLA is the Special Libraries Association. That's actually an international group, which I think is very cool. Urban Libraries Council is ULC, and IMLS is something you might see a lot as well. They do a lot of, most recently I've worked a lot with their studies on contaminated materials for COVID and things like that, but that's the Institute of Museum and Library Services. And OCLC, instead of just interlibrary loan, there's more things to it as well, but it is the Online Computer Library Center. And also just wanted to touch on a few acronyms. Something that's also come up before is we have a lot of counties that start with a C. So I'm also trying to maybe in the future we'll include all of the library systems as well. But statewide, we have MLA, which is the Maryland Library Association, which is experiencing its centennial next year. MSL is the Maryland State Library. MAPLA is the Maryland Association of Public Library Administrators. MASL is the Maryland Association of School Librarians. MILO, hopefully you know what that is. That's the Maryland Interlibrary Loan Organization. And SLRC is the State Library Resource Center. And CML is the Citizens for Maryland Libraries. And we also have our regional library associations. So ESRL is the Eastern Shore Regional Library. SMERLA is also one of my favorite ones to say, is the Southern Maryland Regional Library Association, and WRML, also fun to say, Western Maryland Regional Libraries. So I went through that very fast. So we will also have those all spelled out for you on the slides when we upload that to slrc.info. And we have reached the end. Thank you all for being with us today. If you still have some time to spare, if you wanted to ask us any questions, feel free to put it into the Q&A and we'll answer it in the next few minutes.
Thank you so much, Chelsea and John. You shared a lot of information with us. We are short on time, so if we get any questions, I'll go ahead and run through those really quickly, but thank you for your wonderful presentation. I hope everyone that's joined us has learned something valuable today. And I want to thank everyone for attending. I don't see anything that's come through on the Q&A yet. A lot of great sessions and a lot of thank yous. Yes, it was a really great session. A lot of information to take away.
Thank you, Keisha. Thank you, John.
Okay, so if no one has any questions, again, I would like to thank you all and thank you to our ASL interpreters. And please join us for our next and final session of the day. It is going to be providing services to Marylanders with visual, physical, or other print disabilities, and that will begin at 3 o'clock. So we'll see you in a bit.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.